Welcome to Scream Quest, a limited run series spin off rather of our regular podcast, Scream Quest. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Waterman, joined as always by May Finch.
Hey everyone.
And Mr. Will Rotondi.
Hey, how's it going?
You guys are stuck with your regular host this week. I'm so sorry. No, just kidding. We will be doing a discussion around slow burn horror today, talking about a pair of films, The Exorcist and Midsommar, and we'll be really just grappling with what makes a slow burn horror film effective. The first film we will be discussing is The Exorcist. And as always, let's start with some general impressions, y'all. Tell me if you've seen it before, and if not, give me your general impression. Well, give me your general impressions either way, I guess, but tell me if it's your first time, as always, and we'll start with May this time.
This is my first time. It definitely was kind of, I guess, overhyped to me because I've heard, oh my God, this is the scariest film ever. But I also knew, given the time period, it probably wasn't going to be as bad as like some modern movies. So I really wasn't sure what to expect. And I was legitimately scared, perhaps more so than I was watching Midsommar at certain points.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was impressed with that. Did not see that end coming at all. So the plot twist got me. And yeah, I was pretty impressed with it. There were certain points that did get a little bit slow and boring to me, but I appreciate that was lulling me into a false sense of security.
Yes, it definitely puts the slow into the slow burn at times. Well, very cool. I'm glad that this is a movie. Whenever I recommend it to people, I say, listen, I have no idea how you're going to feel about this, but some people watch it and they're terrified by it, and then other people are completely underwhelmed as like a modern audience. So I never know where someone's gonna land. I'm glad that it was effective for you. That's great.
Maybe I just relate as also being a young woman with a fucked up face right now.
Oh, that's not true. That's not true at all. And yeah, like we'll talk about the makeup and stuff in a little bit, but wow, like to take such a pretty sweet little girl and like where they go with that, it's just, I think that still works,
intense.
Regardless of how scared you are. I think we can all agree like the makeup and the effects work really still like holds up tremendously, in my opinion, anyway. But Will, have you seen The Exorcist before? And regardless, what do you think of The Exorcist?
I've seen it a couple of times before, so this is probably either the second or the third time that I've watched it the whole way through. And I agree that the makeup work is like awesome. I mean, Max von Sydow being like, he was like in his 40s, and they make that dude out to look like he's 80. Like watching this film, I forgot that he was in it, and so I'm like, wait, he's not really that old though, right? Like, how old is he when he passed away? So I think he passed away, right? I'm not.
He passed away. I think I want to say it was like over COVID because we were watching The Seventh Seal, and I know we were talking about Max von Sydow. Yeah, man, he looks like he's on death's doorstep convincingly. Like,
yeah, like I was so I'd forgotten about that, and so rewatching that, I was like, that was one thing that stuck out to me. Overall, I think the story is very interesting. I agree that it is very slow, and you kind of have to go in with that mindset that it's not going to be like in your face all the time, although there's going to be some jump scares and a few things that maybe you didn't necessarily expect to see on screen for when that came out. And I know that was like, it was very much an issue, or it was very talked about as being a big deal for what it was when it came out. And so sort of thinking about it in that context, I can appreciate it for what it was and what it helped add to the horror genre in films that you see now. And overall, I would definitely recommend this film to anybody. I think you should see it at least once just to experience it. It's not necessarily going to be, I think, depending on what you believe in. Like for me, I knew someone in grade school who, or like back in middle school, who was Catholic, still is Catholic, I should say, and very much like this was a terrifying film for her. And so if you believe in possession, if you believe in in demonic possession and being controlled by some unforeseen force, I can imagine that is absolutely terrifying. It's like me with Jaws, like I'm not going to go in the water. So I can definitely appreciate it for that. And I think that going into it, depending on what you believe, will also influence how you come out of the film.
Yeah, I saw this probably about the time that I was having, my shall we say, complicated breakup with the Catholic Church. Like I hadn't really come down squarely on my like religious beliefs and where I was landing at that point, but I knew that like the Catholic Church as an institution was something that I wanted to get away from. But still, having been raised in that environment, like this was very effective for me as a young person when I saw it. And even though like I can't say I was a true believer, I think that I still had a lot of that ingrained into me, and a lot of the rituals and sort of like the when they're doing the Exorcist itself, and there's those responses and like all that, I kind of stays with you your whole entire life, like as a Catholic, I feel like, because it is such a I don't know, ritualistic sect of Christianity, like probably more so I think than a lot of like Christian sects. Like things have largely stayed the same, the format of mass and things like that. So yeah, I can see being a true believer being a great gateway to really turning the dial up on the horror factor for sure.
Yeah, I'm
so
also not someone who believes in the paranormal and still quite scared by it. So yeah, I can't imagine watching this as someone who is open to this actually happening in your life.
I think kind of what makes this work too is like you get the impression, I think, in the movie that Chris McNeil, like the mom, is not really particularly religious and not much of a believer either. And so you can kind of put yourself in her shoes of like, what would you do if all other possibilities have been ruled out, and this is what you think is maybe the only salvation for your daughter, like and maybe being confronted with like that maybe there is like this other like part of the universe, the spiritual world, in other words, that can bleed into ours. Like that would be pretty scary, I think, for a different reason as a non-believer, because like you're confronted sort of like in questioning probably the rest of your life what your beliefs actually are. You're having your belief system kind of shaken up. So well, what I want to do is take us kind of through The Exorcist, and we'll do this with each of these films, and we can kind of start and stop as we wish. But what I want you guys to do is picture, close your eyes and picture a nice little sliding scale, and I'm going to call this the nope meter. Okay, and a 1 on the nope meter is like you would vacation, at this place in the context of Midsommar, and then like with The Exorcist, we'll say that like you're in, I guess, like the context of Reagan, and as a parent, like you have no concern, no worry, like you want to hug your daughter constantly, and you're comfortable. We'll slide that up to like the 5, and that's like you're a concerned parent, and wanting to get your child help. And then like we'll say a 10 is like you're putting that child up for adoption and sticking it somewhere literally anywhere else but your house. So I want to know, putting yourself in the shoes of the characters as we go through these 2 movies, like where you are on that note meter, and you can kind of expound as you want. Okay. So we'll start like I said, with, I guess, since we're on The Exorcist, with kind of unraveling the plot. The film begins, you see Chris McNeil is not quite a single mother, but for all intents and purposes she is. The father is largely absent, and you kind of get the impression that he's not very interested in his daughter's life. She's in Washington DC, or more specifically Georgetown, shooting a film, staying in a house temporarily, and things seem to be largely okay. What's the first indication for you guys where something is wrong? Like where's the I guess, can we all agree the scratching sounds in the attic, right? That's kind of the first little indication that where things going on. So kind of beginning there, where's your nope meter? Where's your, you hear some scratching in the attic?
It's not a 1.
Yeah.
Put it that way. I mean, I know there's all kinds of things that can end up in walls. I had something scratching in my wall as a child, actually, and if I could have moved, I would have. But
Yeah.
I'd say it's a solid 3 for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair, because you don't know, like, what is it, rodents? Like,
I've heard weird animal noises before in places where you don't really want to go check it out because it's dark and you're like, I'm just not going to do that, but I know it's probably okay. And, pest service in the morning will take care of it. I'd still go probably with a 1. I wouldn't be too concerned. If I didn't hear any like really like creepy, like demonic noises, maybe that might change it. But if it's just the little skitter across the floor, I just wouldn't go up there, but I'd be okay at 1.
and kudos to them too for like, the house, I don't know if it's something the studio provided, like in the context of the movie, like in that fictional setting or what, but like if she'd gone up there and there's like just an empty attic, like I think that's way less unsettling than all this stuff where you're kind of like, all right, was something gonna pop out? There's things covered with blankets and stuff. I always like that, like, because your eye is drawn to that stuff, and of course, like you're looking for like monsters and things like automatically. I think I'm trying to think, and you guys can chime in. Like, what's the next sort of escalation? We have the Ouija board, I guess, right? Like that scene with the Ouija board, unless there's something else I'm missing, where Reagan kind of talks about Captain Howdy, and she's been talking to this imaginary friend, is what Chris McNeil presumes. And yeah, there's the bit with the Ouija board. Agree? I
guess there's the part where Chris goes into the attic, and then like right before she turns, there's like the candle that she's carrying sort of like erupts really abruptly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So okay, let's take those two like kind of in stride, because I feel like that's an escalation, but it's not, anything like too crazy. So
yeah.
how about, where's your note meter there? You're carrying a
I don't know
candle, it
if
erupts.
Yeah, I was gonna say if I saw the candle actually do that, we might jump up to a 3.
Oh, you're only at a 3. Okay. How about you, May?
So first of all, I just want to say that the way they made the I'm blanking on the name of it, but the thing that you drag over the Ouija board, the way they made it look like it did truly move on its own, if you were watching closely, it was really good. I appreciated that detail. Yeah, I think as soon as your daughter says she's been talking to a strange man, strange invisible man, I'd be at a 5. Yeah.
Yeah, I like, and she's like, all right, take it easy, Reagan. That thing clearly moved on its own. Like, I feel like, what just happened there? Yeah. The candle too.
She's 12. I don't know if standards are different, but I feel like 12 is very old to have an imaginary friend.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
okay.
That is a really good point. And I think like the setup is maybe such that you can suspend your disbelief a little bit. They're very subtle about it, but clearly like Reagan's having some difficulties, like the conversations with the mother asking like, do you like Mr. Burke? Do you love him like you love daddy? That kind of stuff. Like she's obviously going through and dealing with some things. And I think they do a nice job kind of setting up that. But it's within the realm of possibility that you'd be like, okay, maybe she's having some adjustment issues with like the divorce or separation or something. But
that's fair.
Yeah, the candle, and like no explanation for that. At the very least, I'm concerned about a gas leak if that happens in the house. Like that's valid. Like, shit, we gonna burn down. I feel like I'd be at about 4 or 5, like at that point, like personally. I'm gonna say, like, for time's sake, let's jump to the dinner party where Chris has all the kind of actor friends, and there's the priest and their astronaut. Like, she's got a pretty cool circle, first of all. Like, you got a fucking astronaut, a priest, and like actors and directors. Like, it almost sounds like a setup for a joke in a way. Like,
she seems very worldly.
Yeah, right. Like, nice little friend circle. And I love that house, by the way. Like, I'd have a party there, or attend a party there, I should say. And they're all hanging out, and Reagan comes down the stairs and looks at the astronaut and says, "You're gonna die up there," and then urinates on the floor. And then, of course, like promptly after, when the guests leave and the maid is sort of scrubbing it up, there's the screams and the thumping, and then you walk in and you see the entire bed shaking. Where are you at on a nope meter, on a nope scale there? Those two events quickly, one after the other.
So like, I'm not a mother, but I feel like a mother's love is very strong. So I feel like at that point, I am concerned for my daughter, but not afraid of her. I would be afraid of this house though. Like, what the hell's going on with that bed? That is not normal. Did she check under it even? Like,
I don't know. And not to have too much of a tangent, but the line that always makes me laugh is like, the problem's not in your daughter's bed. It's such a weird thing to say to somebody. The doctor's talking to. Like, anyway, I don't know if she looked at it, but you feel like you would, right?
I feel like at that point, I would stay somewhere else, even if it's just for a little while, and I do come back to that house. I'd be like, okay, something weird is going on here. I need to get the house inspected. I'm going somewhere else with my daughter for a while.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. That's pretty much we're leaving. We're not staying here.
Yeah, I feel like I'd be like a 6 to 7 at that point. Not necessarily, I think May was right. Like, not necessarily afraid of the my daughter, but I would certainly, like, my concern level is high because of the paranormal event, but also like, my daughter's wetting herself in front of guests and saying some really off the wall shit. Like, maybe something is affecting her. Yeah, maybe it is psychological, but something is clearly wrong. Yeah.
Again, gas leak seems like a likely candidate here.
Great point. Yeah, the candle's flaring up. Yeah, I don't know if gas leaks make you pee, but certainly could account for some strange behavior. That's definitely for sure.
Or carbon monoxide, or something chemically is not right.
All right, so let's kind of proceed into I guess the next escalation, excuse me, which would be the first time you really hear the voice change, and there's that weird goiter that like pops up on the neck, and the door slams shut, and she just backhands Chris McNeil, I think, right? Is that the crucifix scene? There's a couple of different.
I think the slap was the crucifix scene, but I could be wrong.
So maybe just the goiter, part is for lack of a better word. It's the doctors. Yeah. Like she's like up on, like, kind of doing the sit-ups and bouncing up, and then you see the little goiter thing. Okay. So you have medical professionals that are now there, and they're clearly flummoxed. Like, where are you at on the nope scale?
I mean, the sit-up thing that you mentioned, if I saw that in real life, I'd probably be concerned. Watching it in a film just kind of makes me laugh, but I don't know, with medical professionals that don't really know, I guess that's always like a sense of foreboding about what's really happening, but I don't know. I might still be between that 5 and 7.
Yeah, I actually don't. I'm not anti-medicine, but as someone who's been to doctors for a lot of different things, it's not that rare for them to be flummoxed by something.
That's a good point.
So that doesn't necessarily stand out to me too much. If I saw her getting that much air and moving that fast and erratically, I probably would have gone ahead and just gone straight to the priest, because I do not buy that story about adrenaline somehow like allowing her to do that. Like, come on.
No. And the attitude change is quite different, and the voice too. Like, I feel like that's a pretty growly, deep voice for a 12-year-old girl.
Oh man.
So I heard as I was letting the dogs out, sorry for that, that so you were asking about how they got her to do so. This film was notorious for being horrible to like actors, unfortunately. So they had a harness rigged up to her. So when she's yelling, it burns, like stop
Oh,
it,
no.
like that's actually Linda Blair like asking them to cut because it was like hurting her abdominal muscles. So like that's like real pain that they thought she was in performance.
No.
This is like the
Similarly,
moment I
when
learned about Milo and Otis, dude. It's not good.
yeah, no, I know. But like similarly, like when Chris McNeil gets slapped, and falls back and screams and holds her back, she was like throwing the takes, and William Friedkin told the stunt guy that had like the cable attached to her, like, I want you to like put her ass on the ground as hard as you can. Like she can't do this on her own. So when she screams in pain, I think she like
she hurt her back, right?
Fractured her tailbone or something. Yeah, like it's like so
God.
that's really real. And he would like fire guns on set, like with blanks to like scare people and get them like jittery and stuff. Like William Friedkin he's kind of known as like a true Hollywood like bad boy that like people don't usually talk very pleasant. Like he's effective at what he does, but he certainly had, we'll say, unconventional methods for getting a lot of the stuff out of this. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's story after story with the production of this movie of like things that like you would never work in Hollywood again probably today. If you did, like that story would be, you know, out on the tabloids, and like this production would shut down and you would probably be fired. So
I'd read that she hurt her back for real, but I didn't realize it was because of that reason. So that's wow.
Now, when Father Dyer like wasn't able to do the last rites bit, which we'll talk about, like he slapped him across the face. So when his hand, you see his hand shaking, that's because he was like so stunned and upset that like a grown man had just like slapped him across the face. Again, things you would never do today. It's a different time, I guess. Not that that excuses the behavior, but yeah.
That's like when you read about like Kubrick. Speaking of like The Shining, you know, as one of the options that we had for this week, like some of the stuff that he put people through on that film as well. You're just like, yeah, these guys.
It was protective, at least over little Danny Lloyd, who thought he was in a family drama, like for years and years. He never knew he was in a horror film. They just told him he was in like a family, drama. So like, they had a lot of creative ways of like selling like what the scenes were versus what they actually were. But, yeah.
Wow.
Yep. Let's talk about that crucifix scene, because I feel like that is number one, it's like an infamous like scene, you know, probably the most infamous scene, maybe not the most famous, but the most infamous. Certainly like the pea soup comes up and the spinning head comes up a lot when you hear this movie talked about, but this one is always the one that like people talk about for shock factor, where if you're hanging with this movie up to this point, probably as a contemporary audience in 1972, like this may have been the straw that broke the camel's back. So we'll talk about your note meter in a second, but as a first time watcher, will try to put yourself back when you first saw it, and then of course May, like as a first time watcher, did this shock you? Do you think it's still shocking now as a modern audience member?
It did, yeah. It like came not entirely out of left field, because at that point, like the demon had been saying like extremely vulgar things, and so like I guess it's like kind of foreshadowing, but yeah, no, it caught me off guard, and I feel like that's good because you do feel that like horror that the mom must feel walking in on this. I think that's when I started to actually like feel some fear for this little girl. Up until then, it's easier to kind of like keep some distance, but that moment between mother and daughter is just like so heartbreaking. It's definitely what like pulled me in and like grabbed my attention for the rest of the film.
Yeah, it seems to be the moment that Chris McNeil, I think too, like decides that like to hell with like the medical professionals, like we gotta explore, you know, the shock treatment option, as they call it. Will, do you remember what you thought of this the first? Did you know this was in the movie like when you sat down to watch it the first time? Like did you have any like warning
I had no warning about it, and I actually didn't even remember that it happened. I mean, if it registered the first time I saw this movie, I'd forgotten that this was even in there watching it again, and I have no idea why, because it literally is like the most shocking part of the entire film. But I guess in some ways it helped me relive that shock somehow. But yeah, that to me, I was just like, whoa, okay, yeah, here we go. But that would be my nope moment. That would be like the 10 for me. I'd be like, all right. You can't stay here.
But you're still sticking with the daughter, not putting her up for adoption. I feel like that's more of a 8, a 9. Like I feel like 10 is like 10 is like
still
your
family.
like you're like it's abandonment, man. Like it's every person for themselves. But
that's true. If it literally is I'm disowning my child and letting the demon like take her, then
we're putting her away someplace,
Yeah.
as she says. Like, yeah.
Then if that is the extreme version of that meter, then no, I wouldn't be there yet. But that's definitely getting close, like the 8 mark, where it's like, okay, yeah. I don't know. I feel like disownment really shouldn't. I don't really want to put
Not
it on my
disown.
meter,
Maybe
'cause
like putting her like in a psychiatric facility.
Yeah,
We'll
then
be nice. We'll be
would
kinder.
Yeah, well, there's definitely some professional help is needed to address the self-mutilation. So that might be my 10 then, for those.
Yeah,
That's
I do
fair.
think that I agree. That would be my point. That would be the point I would put her in a hospital. She was actively hurting herself that way.
Yeah.
I don't.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I don't remember if this was before or after. I think it was before this, and I don't want to completely gloss over it. But I would like to talk about all the medical tests she has to go through at some point.
Yes.
Yeah. It's definitely before this, but yeah, those scenes. I've seen people like react worse to those scenes than the crucifix in terms of like squeamishness.
That I am people.
Yeah. Oh, I agree 100%, because that feels more real to me than anything else in this film. It's just like the torture of going through all of that. So yeah, no, I'm 100%, especially when like they stick her and the blood starts to spurt out, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that got me.
That was very scary scene for me. Even though it's like a semi-controlled environment, it's like you don't know how she's going to react, because she is pretty clearly not herself at that point. And you're worried she's just going to do something that's going to like actually make things really worse, because she has like needles and shit in her and dangerous machines all around her.
Yeah,
and still being like conscious for some of that too. Sorry, Chris, that was my only thought.
No. Yeah, I mean that's a good point. Like, there's like as somebody who's like seen this movie a million times, you kind of forget, like you like not knowing in the moment, like oh, is the fucking demon gonna pop off and grab a surgical instrument, or like start ripping stuff out. Like, yeah, you don't know. Yeah, as somebody who's like been through like a angiogram where they like cut a little hole in your femoral artery and run a camera up your leg and all that, like you are awake for that, and it's terrible, dude. Like I straight up did not have a good time, and like that scene kind of like affects me in a way that it didn't used to, because like it's not the same exact thing that she's going through, but sort of that like twilight awareness, and like it's very uncomfortable, and like it takes a while. Like I just like I always get a little sweaty when I when I see that now in a way that I didn't quite used to.
She's also just so young. Like
yeah.
I was fortunate I not to do any like scans or tests or like that like when I was a kid, but when I was like 18 I had to go in and get an x-ray in this giant machine, and that was terrifying because it was my first time doing something like that, and you're very vulnerable and exposed, and it's just not great. I can't imagine going through that at 12 when there's some demonic thing inside of you too.
No, yeah, and like I love the little sob that Chris McNeil gives, like when they're in the hallway talking after they've kind of sedated her, and they're like, "We have to do this again. It's going to involve another spinal," and she just like lets out this like very realistic sob that is like, the only thing it can be is like a sob of a mom who like doesn't want to put her child through like any more of that. Like I think it's a really great moment from Ellen Bernstein, like a good bit of little acting, Yeah. So going quickly back to the crucifix like moment, like I don't know, man. Like I hesitate to even use the word masturbation. I know that's what everyone calls this, but it's more mutilation. But see, if
Yeah.
I walked in, saw my daughter mutilating herself, and then she shoved my face like into her pubic region and smeared blood all over my face, and then slapped me across the room, like, yeah, you're going to the best help I can afford to send you to, like, in an inpatient facility, like, full stop. Like, um I would be absolutely terrified, both of like what she would do to herself, but also just like the entire situation. I think like anybody would be willing to forgive you making that decision and being like, I've reached my wits end on like what to do, here.
And I
But
do want to say I don't want to say devil's advocate for this movie, but
Hey, what?
I do want to say, like, I do understand the mother's hesitation to send her to a hospital, because those were nowhere near what we think of an inpatient psychiatric hospital as being today. Today, they
Great
are
point.
still pretty fucked up. And I think there's also a little bit of her reputation on the line, since she is a
Sure.
celebrity. And I think that if she can at all manage this in her house without word getting out that, she's shipped her daughter off to a psych hospital, she's going to do that.
Yeah, that's a
I
really
still
good
would have
point.
made a different call, but I do see her perspective there.
Yeah, like context is everything. Like and they kind of contrast that a little bit with Damian Karras, like, right, and like his mom and like the decision he's trying to make
Yeah.
there, and what like a state run play, like that's obviously supposed to be kind of like worst case scenario, but obviously like there's a sort of stigma tied to that. And even him as a medical professional, because he is like, he's a priest but he's also a medical professional, doesn't seem to have the highest opinion of that in all circumstances. So let's fast forward a little bit and kind of like get into it all with like Father Karras and kind of how things escalate. We won't have time to go like scene for scene, but let's talk about him as a character, because I think like along with Chris McNeil and Reagan, like he is probably like the heart of this movie for me, and has maybe the one of the most interesting arcs in the film. So did you guys like Damian Karras? You think you like him as a character?
I do. He's not perfect, but I think that ultimately he means well. He means to help. But it is arguable though. So, but sorry, May, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. He's very sympathetic, and I think they go at great lengths to show that this is not an easy decision for him to perform the exorcism. He's not kind of like chomping at the bit, looking for like opportunities to do these. Which just like knowing what I know about true crime and other cases of exorcism definitely feels like pro-exorcism propaganda. I don't know. Because generally it is more of a kind of a sideshow publicity kind of thing, not oh yeah, these are dire circumstances and putting all this thought into it kind of thing. But as he's portrayed in the film, yes, he's very likable and sympathetic, and you just kind of want to give the guy a hug or a head pat or something the whole movie.
Yeah, like the crisis of faith like obviously spoke to me, because again, this was at like a very formative point in my life, like with my own like religious experiences, but also like as somebody dealing with an aging parent, right, and he's frustrated because he doesn't want to force his mom to do anything, but he's worried about her. And then like the guilt, oh man, that's the most Catholic thing ever. It's just the overwhelming guilt that he feels the entire rest of the film once his mom passes away and he's not there. Is all like, it's very relatable. I mean, if you're not Catholic, it's very relatable aspect, that he's got this sort of conflict between like the secular world and the spiritual world, and what does he believe, just that he feels inadequate, right, like with helping people with their spiritual problems. And then of course he's presented with the this huge test of faith and like a chance to do something good that's sort of in that wheelhouse, right? All right, well, let's talk about the finale, which includes the arrival of Marin. I called him Maris earlier, I think, Father Marin, played by Max von Sydow. And really from the time he gets there, like that, like there's very little sort of like closure after that. It's like most of the movie from that point is just that the exorcist itself, or the exorcism I should say, itself. one of the coolest movie sets ever. Like it was a refrigerated room to get that breath, they couldn't digitally do in breath, so it was a refrigerated room, which is really neat. I think some of the scariest bits that happen obviously in the thing too, like with the changing voices and things. Did you guys, and maybe not enjoy, did you find the finale effective?
It definitely surprised me. Like I said, I was not anticipating that twist. I thought they were just going to chant at her until the demon left. So yeah, it definitely caught me off guard.
You're talking about the suicide, I'm assuming, like the jumping out of the window.
Yeah. It was sad because you do feel like that wasn't just a selfless move on father's part. He was very broken at that point, and seems like he didn't see too much point in life anyway, which is very dark. I guess it kind of was just like the best way he could see to do it. The like kind of final moments with Father Dyer, I thought was very sweet, but now it's like less so now that I know he got slapped in the face.
I know. Sorry to color your opinion, but yeah, the squeezing of the hand, it's such a beautiful thing. I don't even think I noticed that the first time I saw it, that he was squeezing the responses.
I like that it felt like a very human and messy ending rather than a very straightforward, yes, we struck out the evil. Good job, priest.
Well, yeah, like I love like this like last stretch, like the exorcism itself. Like it's one of those things, like I know it's just movie magic and stuff, like as far as how the room is lit and everything. Like it's like you would never like put some lights on in that play. Do you got to do it in like this like dimly lit where like but it works, like it's effective. And I think everything from like the rotating head to her like flying, floating up into the air is all still very, very scary. And the part that still gives me chills is when she like is like got her hands like reaching up and she's sort of silhouetted, and you see the statue that was in Iraq earlier in the film behind her, and she's making that weird moan. Like that still like gives me absolute goosebumps like every time I see it, just because I think it's weird and kind of off-putting.
I'm afraid the head turn really took me out of it, because I'm like, okay, that would kill her. Like that, she's not coming back from that.
Yeah, it's just extreme chiropractic.
Like I buy her being stronger than normal and like faster than normal and that kind of stuff, but
it is definitely it's wild. Like I love that mannequin. It's kind of cut beautifully where like you can't quite register that it's like it's a mannequin that they made to do that. But yeah, I'm sure again probably in the contemporary audiences probably lost their minds with something like that. Like props to Linda Blair, who
dude,
I know it's not her voice like for like some of the demon bits, it's dubbed, but just the facial expressions and the contortion of her body and all of that stuff. Oh my goodness, like what a performance. All right, well, we already all hit our max nope meters, so that's why I kind of stopped doing the check-ins, because like we're out before these characters. Anybody want to add anything before we move on to Midsommar?
Only that I was when I remember watching the film and just thinking that Father Merrin was just gonna like I thought he was gonna die at the beginning of the film. I feel like the first thing is just like how frail and how like disoriented he seems, and then when they talked about how long that he did an exorcism for previously, and I feel like I was always interested to see how long it was going to take this go around. And so to your point, Chris, about how you talk about when the film just hits the gas and doesn't let up, and then it's just like, bam, it's done, that it just seems so abrupt that, we had that one scene where he was working really hard and then he's just, off camera, you see that he just passes. And so whatever had happened between that, I just thought that was so sudden and kind of expected, but I guess sort of unexpected for the circumstance and what was happening right before everything, then the big twist or the big surprise and all that with Damien. So that was only other thought.
Yeah, I wonder if modern audiences, or sorry, contemporary audiences would have been primed for that or not. Like you know me, New Hollywood. So like this is like a few years into that movement. If they would have been expecting that, or if it would have still been unexpected, because I know the happy ending wasn't, something that was as overly done probably by this point. So maybe people would have been primed for that or not. I don't know. But it's kind of a crazy 1-2 punch. Like Marin goes, and then Father Karras is like fuck taking days. I'm just gonna beat the shit out of you and demand that you possess me. We're going the short route, baby. And yeah, out he goes. That stunt's really cool too. Like that's the only thing I'll add. That's the going down the stairs. And one of my favorite production stories is a bunch of like neighborhood kids were selling tickets to come up on the rooftop to like watch the stunt happen, and the guy fucked it up the first time, so I had to do it a second time. And so yeah, a bunch of neighborhood kids were making money.
That's amazing.
So people could go up on the roof and watch the stunt guy go all the way down. Those steps are still there, by the way. And so if you're ever in Georgetown, you can do a little pilgrimage and go check it out.
Now, when you say
Very
fucked
nice.
up, did he get hurt or did he just mess up?
No, I think like it just didn't sell it right. Or maybe the coverage was blown on one of the cameras or something like that. Or maybe they needed extra coverage, but they had to do it twice.
I was almost, because of the rate we're going, it was like he was pushed down the stairs by
Yeah,
someone to make it
William
look more
Friedkin was
realistic.
hey, how many stairs do you think there are down there? And the guy's like 1, 2, and he just kicks him. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Let's go from the streets of Georgetown to the idyllic sunny vistas of, I forget the name of the place already. It's very
Sweden.
sounding. Yeah, it's Sweden, but like the village. Let's see if I can find this in here. But anyway, let's talk some Midsommar, shall we? At the top, first of all, May, I am so super stoked that you made it through this. It's a tough watch. I'm sorry, but also like super stoked that you made it through, because I think it is a journey like worth taking if you can stomach it, and we'll certainly get into that. So props to you, congratulations. Like
Thank you. It's not that I was like thinking I couldn't do it. It's just I'm the kind of person that if I know an experience is going to be uncomfortable and the reward isn't there, I'm like, but the reward is now a podcast, so I did it.
Yay. And I will say, like, in your defense, this is the most to give you some background with my experience, and of course I want to hear your impressions both. This is the most I've ever like sweat and been physically uncomfortable in a movie theater. I saw this at our little local Sunray, and made the mistake of ordering a barbecue pizza. I got to the opening bit, and I like pushed it away, and I was like, that's for later. But like I've never sweat so much in a movie theater before, and been just so I don't know, like on edge and dialed up before or since like seeing this movie. So the props I'm giving you are genuine, because like I feel like I have a very high tolerance and not much phases me in the world of horror, and this was like a different beast for me for sure. General impressions. May, we're gonna go to you first here again, so tell us a little bit about your experience with Midsommar.
So I watched this with Patrick actually, and we just mutually decided about an hour in we needed an intermission and paused it for a bit because we were just so full of dread and repulsion.
Was it before the scene, or like was it like
it was after some heads get smashed.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair.
So we took a little break then, and then we buckled down for it. But so I mentioned earlier I felt more afraid during The Exorcist, and I would say my feeling during Midsommar was just unrelenting dread. I was never too afraid because I mean, obviously just because it's been such a successful film, I did know kind of what happened and kind of how it ended, but also just the way it's set up. how broken Danny and Christian's relationship seems, how broken Danny seems going into it. The fact that like these guys all seem a little bit pent up and volatile, and they're going into this very strange village. I just felt as soon as they got there that yeah, none of these people are leaving. And I don't know about you guys, but for me to feel true fear, I need to like I need to have like a little glimmer of hope. And I didn't really have that. I was like, okay, these people are going to meet terrible ends. Let's see how that happens. So yeah, it was masterfully done, like truly a cinematic masterpiece. The score was incredible, but I hated it. It was it was a dreadful experience, beautifully crafted, dreadful experience.
I'm sure Ari Aster would probably take that as a huge compliment.
God, what a fucking weird movie, man. No, I jokingly referred before we recorded it, referred to it as a girl wins a dance competition and drops her toxic boyfriend. You know, it is something. Yeah, it was sort of one of those films where, having watched plenty of slasher movies and sort of, I don't know, I'd seen Hereditary, and so sort of wondering if it would feel like that in terms of the build-up, the slow build, and that there is some very surprising sudden violence that happens, but wondering just how much of that there would be. I was actually pleasantly surprised that it wasn't as gory beyond that one scene that it was. Like, then it was. I sort of expected there to be like, I don't know, maybe more to it than that. And so I was glad to know that it wasn't like just a bunch of body mutilation that was going to follow later. But that first, the first big shocker, man, when you see the head smashing, the old folks taking the dive off the side of the cliff, I thought, okay, so what's the when people start to disappear later, how much am I going to see of that, and so, but most of that's not. It's just people just suddenly start leaving, and you hear one story about what supposedly happened to them, and then you come to find out at the very end just sort of where they all ended up. And you kind of had that feeling that, okay, this is probably where it's going to end, location wise, for the temple that's there. But yeah, leading up to it, I was like, I didn't really know what to expect. I thought there were plenty of moments that are very beautiful, artistically, stylistically very beautiful. The music, I agree with, is great. That feeling of dread is definitely there. You're not really sure how, I mean, you, like you said, May, you assume everybody's gonna not make it out in the end, so you're just wondering how that's gonna happen. I think for me, going into it, I was more just the frustration that I felt for most of it was actually just directed at the main guys that were there, because they are just so unlikable. And so you're sort of wondering if you're supposed to like really hate the people that they go to visit as much, as you probably should, because they're not great either. They do some questionable, shady stuff. But yeah, man, what a ride. And we'll probably talk about it later, but that sex scene, man, was just so weird.
Yep. Our friend Becca from Keg and Coin, May was there with her son.
Oh
to see
no!
it. And she did not read, because she's like, oh, horror, like, she'll let him watch anything like horror related, and that it just went on and on and on. And I think both of them were properly embarrassed, as you would imagine.
A little uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have much to add other than like I think probably one of my favorite aspects of this is watching Florence Pugh as Danny. I think the journey that she goes on, like in throughout the movie, from where she starts to where she ends, and it's just really interesting to watch that performance and to kind of see how she processes it versus everyone else. And we'll get into that a little bit, as we talk about like how the plot unfolds. But Number one, I don't think I've ever felt so gut-wrenched by crying as like I do when I hear Florence Pugh cry in this movie. Like that scene on the couch in the beginning when she's like sobbing, it's just like it makes me like tense up and just feel horrible, not just because of what's happened, but just watching somebody in that kind of pain. It's fully believable. But yeah, I think
I love the commitment to actually showing ugly crying, because in so
Hmm.
many movies the girl has to do the pretty cry, the little sniffle, and this when you are truly heartbroken, this is how you cry. And I appreciated the commitment, especially from Florence Pugh.
absolutely. Yeah, it's very real, grounded. But the only other thing I'll add is I think that's probably the prettiest horror film that's ever been made, like in my opinion. And I think there's nothing quite like it. I think it is wholly unique and unconventional in so many different ways. So that's why I picked it. So let's dive into the plot and the nopometer. We're gonna kind of skip over the preamble. I will talk. It's important for context to kind of just say what happens, which is her sister, I think they say, has bipolar disorder.
Yes.
Yep. Tragically murders their parents and commits suicide in sort of I guess the middle of winter, right? It's a very big juxtaposition, right, with like how it opens and sort of this urban landscape with like snow everywhere. And you get the sense that things aren't great between her and her boyfriend. And then it kind of fast forwards, a few months, and they reveal that their mutual college buddy has invited them to his village in Sweden to participate in a midsummer festival. They get invited, and Danny twists his arm and understandably upset because he's sort of like conveniently forgotten to tell her that like he's going on this European trip, and off they go. All right, so the first juncture I want to check in with the nopometer is you arrive in this beautiful field where there's rolling hills, and somebody walks up to you with a bag of drugs. Like, what's your nopometer at? Stranger with a bag of drugs. It's okay, no judgment here, by the way. Like, no judgment.
Are we saying you would I would look at it from the perspective of I wouldn't take it, but I would still hang out just to see where this is gonna go. So this is probably not really that weird to me that would be, because they have established at this point that they are okay doing drugs together.
Yes.
In college. So I'm not like phased at all by that. That actually seems like on par for me. Like, okay, this is the first step in this journey we're doing out, in the country. And yeah, so this will get the vibes right for how things are gonna go. So I wouldn't find that weird at all.
I'm at a 0 personally. I would take some tea. This is like the ideal like environment for me to do it. Like even though there are like strangers, like it's like, yeah, sure. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good. I'd say I wouldn't be weirded out by the drugs, especially because it's like his it's their friend's friends. So it's not like a complete stranger, right? For me, it's just like seeing a bunch of people suddenly stand up out of a field all wearing the same clothes. I think I would be at a 4.
Nice.
Really? Okay.
That freaks me out.
I love it.
You guys got a uniform out here? That's fishy.
He has kind of pitched them as being like rustic. So like for me, I think like, because I'm dumb and naive and I'd probably be the first to die in a horror film. Like I'd probably be like, oh, they're like Quakers or something, or like Amish. I don't know. Like, sure. Like it's fine. As a sidebar,
can we have a horror movie about that too, maybe? About the Amish or the Quakers? I would love to see.
Kind of like Kingpin, but like more sinister,
Oh yes.
Nice. As a sidebar, my favorite like very realistic like depiction of taking psychedelic drugs is when one of the friends, I think it's the Will Poulter character, is like, oh no, more people. Like they're all tripping. He's like, I don't want more people right now, new people. Or he's like, oh, it's new people is what he says. Nice. Which is very funny to me. But
can you lay down for me right now, please?
All of that is really well done, honestly. Like the way things kind of move and breathe, like it's great. And then of course poor Danny has a bad trip, goes running into the woods, and we kind of see that she's obviously still healing, and she thinks that like some of the other people are laughing at her, and then kind of passes out, I guess, like overnight, and is kind of confused upon awakening. So the next juncture is like you get to the village, and they walk through this like amazing, stunning, like sun gate, for lack of a better word. And there's people literally playing like flute music and shit. It's like something out of a Wagner opera, I don't know, to kind of welcome them. Is that disconcerting to you guys, or would that be like, oh, this is lovely? How would you feel about that?
I would actually enjoy that. I would feel very relaxed.
Okay.
I might even be convinced to try the tea at that point, possibly.
Yeah. I love it.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
You walk through this giant sun gate, which is like, kind of like a Stargate, but like, I don't know, like more resplendent. And people are playing music and standing around like in more of the cult garb. Like, how's that? Is that putting you at ease, or is it ramping up the note meter for you, since you're at a 4 already?
I'm at 9.
Whoa, damn. So you're basically, you're gonna politely turn around, or are you running like at a 9, like back, like
I'm politely turning around. I'm going to try to get my my friends to come with me. And if not, I'm just going to tell them I'm making a supply run.
You're like, well, if not, like, the social Darwinism's a thing, I guess, kind of sort of. No,
I'll drive back in a week. If any of them are still alive, I'll take them home.
Damn. All right, so you're at 9. So Will, you're at like still at ease. Like, I feel like my hackles would go up just a little bit, because that feels a little more culty than like, oh, it's a bunch of college age folks like tripping out like in the woods. Like, sure, that seems like in line. Because that village is beautiful, but there is something unsettling. Maybe it's the sharp angles. I don't know like what it is, but I feel like it does put me off a little bit. As you tour the facility, like, is your opinion changing at all? So we got like the communal sleeping, we've got more people that we meet. What is it that would move the note meter for you?
The bear in the cage. The fact that no one talks about the bear in the cage, and also the obvious foreshadowing depicted on this, was it like a quilt or like a like
of the lovely love potion,
the love story about where all that shit is coming from, and no, something is gonna happen. Somebody's gonna get stabbed, or somebody's gonna cut something and put it in food. That's
a tale as old as time. How did your courtship work, man?
It's like witchcraft.
For me, it would be the communal sleeping. Like, even before knowing there would be a baby sleeping there every night as well, like I'm just not doing that. Like, if I wasn't able to turn around earlier, I'd go camp out on those fields again.
Let's get to the scene. First of all, I found this fascinating because like I didn't catch the first time I saw it that Josh this time seems to know what this ritual is when they talk about it the night before. And I feel like it's kind of a dick move to not like at least give a heads up to your friends. Do you agree, first of all, that like, hey, I don't know if they're serious about this, but like, this is my understanding of this like ritual and what this entails, like, heads up. Can we all agree on that?
Yes. And like, I had a hard time getting a read on him as a character too, because he's very quiet, and the couple lines he does say are either very just cold and removed, maybe just supposed to be like the academic guy, or just actively dickish.
I think it's both. I think he's kind of like the cutthroat academic that like wants to make the name for himself, and then him and Christian are kind of in competition a little bit because they have a similar field, and I don't think you're supposed to like him. Like,
Yes.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think you're supposed to like any of those guys. Kind of, but yeah, I don't know. It was weird. It was like he wanted them to be shocked by it. Like he knew it was going to be something, and he probably may or may not have thought it was going to be as real as it turned out to be. But I think that he wanted them to feel shocked or disturbed by it. So that's why he was just sort of like just staying quiet, not saying anything. But I don't know. I mean, I could see it going either way. That he either knew that those old folks were going to take the plunge, or that they weren't, or maybe he didn't know if they were really that they would have the will to do it, versus maybe that was like culturally that he knew that they had done it before from what he'd read about, or where it was with that. So yeah, I could see it going either way.
Yeah. He does seem somewhat shocked, like in the reaction shot, cuts to him. Maybe that's just because knowing something academically versus like seeing it carry out in practice are obviously two different things. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm gonna land firmly in the camp that he's just a dick and withholds the information, to just be a dick. So let's talk about the scene itself. So the two elder members of the tribe have a lot of pomp and circumstance for what most of the other characters don't, or our sort of American characters don't know is like their last meal. And they're carried from the table all the way up to the top of this precipice that is near the village, and they proceed to take a dive off the top in order to basically sacrifice themselves for the good of the tribe and to kind of kick off this midsummer festival. What a scene, huh? The first one's pretty bad. The second one is the one that is like the worst to me. Because as soon as I saw him go pencil dive, I was like, oh no. Like I'm
That's
like,
not how you
buddy,
do it, man.
no, like I mean, call a spade. Like it's gross. It is definitely like visceral, and it like in most movies, I feel like the camera would cut away more than it does in this. Like it really just kind of like makes you look on, putting you into kind of the shoes of the characters that are like the American characters that are sort of mortified and having to watch this whole thing go down. So I do want to hear your thoughts on it because it's such a pivotal scene. And then I think I can guess where the note meters probably are at this point, but I'll certainly take the feedback just in case there's some more surprises. Maybe Will's back down to like a 1. I don't know.
Guys, let's just hear them out, okay? There's probably a reason. Like, did you all not get the memo about what? Yeah. No, I was wondering when you see the guy with the big mallet. I'm like, okay, so what? They're just gonna like bash their head on this like over here on this pedestal, and then they walked up to the top of the cliff, and I'm like, oh, so maybe they still use it. But I'm like, but what? And then when that happened, I was like, oh, it's like to put him out of his misery if he messes it up, because he did. So yeah, dude, I'd be out of there so fast. I wouldn't even say what the fuck is this. I just run, just go. Don't give him a chance.
I don't know if I would even like wait for somebody to go off that cliff. Like personally, I think as soon as I put 2 and 2 together, I'd be like, y'all enjoy, like have fun. Like
yeah.
I was already feeling a lot of dread, but it got so much worse when I realized that the crowd of people was not standing at the top of the cliff, but at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Just a more fucked up place to stand.
Right. Bring your tarp.
Yeah. Oh.
Please stand at least this far back from the
splash zone.
Yeah. I did kind of cover up the screen with my hand briefly then, just because, like I said on the pod before, I'm really bad with like head gore specifically. And then, of course, because of the way this is edited, I thought it was over, like, looked at it, and then they showed another like close-up.
Okay, we're back. In case you looked away 2 seconds ago, just to remind you.
It really feels like it was edited specifically to attack me, okay?
Yeah, it's unconventional. Like I said, I think like there would have been like the one shot in most of these and like you're done, and it does not do that at all.
Yeah. So, yeah, just seeing that, I would realistically be out. But I do get why this is kind of the first thing they do, because you can kind of see like having a cultural difference around like aging and dying. Um, and like this is just a really strange form of assisted suicide. And like you can kind of rationalize it, right? But to me the weirdest part is just that like there's this whole viewing party gathering at the bottom specifically to see the goriest part, like not just like send them off from the top of the cliff, but to deal with the aftermath. So yeah, that I'm back in the car.
Yeah, I'm certainly like, I think if not all, like if I'm in their shoes for a second, I think like the lowest I would be is an 8. You know what I mean? Like if I'm like an anthropologist, like student who's trying to understand cultural relativism and all that stuff, but I don't think I could be below an 8, even like if I was like an academic in that situation, because you have no frame of reference for something like this. I feel like it would still be, shocking, and to the movie's credit, everyone is fairly shocked, even if there's kind of a spectrum of where they're all at. Like obviously the one couple, like they're like all of us. They're like, nah,
Yeah.
that's it, this is fucked up, like, yeah, and they're gone. And I think those are the people that probably most of the audience members are gonna sympathize the most with. um I do love, one of my favorite things about everyone being at the bottom, is you get this sort of trend that carries throughout the rest of the movie, of this sort of idea of like communal feeling where and suffering, where they all kind of mimic the cries of pain together. It's a very unsettling and sort of like beautiful thing that is like repeated a few times in the movie, where it's not just moments of pain, because they do it in the Will's favorite scene, the overly long uncomfortable sex scene, where they're mimicking the ecstasy as well. But I think it's unsettling in both cases regardless, and you kind of see that carry over, and it's a nice kind of indication that the way that this tribe views the human experience is probably quite different than the rest of their guests. So
Yeah, to that, it's like they function. It's very interesting because it's obviously a very communal society, but they function kind of like parts of a larger organism in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And that individualistic pain and joy, like you said, but also agency and boundaries just doesn't exist.
Yeah, like for example, when Christian's like, I think she put a pube in my food, and the response is so great, because it's something to the effect of like, yes, that's very possible, like, or that's very likely. Like,
Yeah. Like, that makes sense, that tracks.
Yeah, like we've she wants to mix up the gene pool a little bit. It's like, what's the big deal? So since we've established our note meters are at this point like are all pretty much maxed out, we'll stop doing check-ins there. I want to open up the table a little bit for anybody to talk about anything that you want with the movie. So any particular aspects or scenes, anything at all that really struck you, or that you enjoyed or didn't enjoy about Midsommar.
The thing that I hadn't like gleaned from the kind of like what I know pop culture wise about the movie was just how important drugs are in all of this. And I think the fact that they have to continuously like ply people with various like beverages and drugs to get their boundaries down, even the people who like were born and raised in this village, right, helps to communicate the fact that none of these people are in the right minds, right?
No.
But second, just yeah, like there's been this whole wholesale degradation of boundaries and the normal things that you rely on to function in society, and that's part of why shit hits the fan so epically.
Yeah, there's kind of a pervasive madness, like I feel like always like lurking underneath the surface, and the drugs are a bit of a part of that. And it's pretty clear by the end that it is like coercive, that in other words, like they're not going to charm anybody into doing the things that they're going to do. And like, yeah, maybe they view it as sort of like a religious aspect of their festival, but it certainly increases like the menacing tone as you get sort of towards the climax with just the way everything looks. And I don't know, man. Talk about a bad trip, you know. Oh, you will anything in particular that you wanted to hit on with Midsommar?
Hit on with a mallet.
Yeah.
I
The mallet of mercy.
yeah, yeah, maybe. So actually I'm glad that you brought up the drugs, because I feel like, I don't know, with everything else that they're able to coerce people with using those drugs, you would think they would have something that would be a little less painful for when somebody wants to pass, or when they get to the end of their life and it's time to go. You would think that it would be a little less jump off the cliff and mutilate yourself. And maybe just some, like, a nice tea that would just make you pass out and fall asleep. And so I just thought that was interesting. And then I guess also to some extent, seeing that whatever drug they gave to the two volunteers from the village that offered to have themselves burned alive doesn't really seem to work out,
No,
taking away the
at
pain
all.
that they say that it will. They're like, oh, this will help ease your passing. And it's like, and that dude catches on fire, he just like screams. And I'm like, yeah, no shit. Don't do that. This is bad, you know. And but it's like, it's too late. And so yeah, that was, and yet strangely enough, they scream, and Christian is like, what? The Christian's been suited up in the bear,
Paralyzed. Yeah.
yeah, and he's paralyzed, and yet, so I don't know. It's like, does he feel any of that, or is he is just paralyzed? He just can't move.
I think the implication is he just can't express it. Like,
Yeah,
he's unable to speak or move. So
man,
it's internal screaming.
yeah. So that was the only thing. It was just off the drugs. Was like, why can't you make this easier? You've made all these other things easier to convince people to do what you want, but you can't, like, just, you know, slip them some really strong drug to you know, just make them die. But
There's part of me that wonders, like, if maybe it's like suffering is part of it a little bit, you know, like
yeah,
the pageantry, like
cathartic.
there's got to be suffering, you know, like, in other words, like maybe the sacrifice doesn't mean as much if it's like easy and painless, which is pretty grim to think about. But like giving your life, it wouldn't be enough. It'd have to be in this way that can produce suffering potentially. Certainly not a good way to go. But you think anyone's ever jumped ship out of this village? Like, look all this, like,
Or tried
you think,
to.
yeah, well, give me that story about like the guy just trying to assimilate into like Western culture, and like he goes to like, I don't know, like a summer picnic, and like is like suspicious, you know, what's going on here? Oh, they're gonna play some music on the bandstand, and we're gonna have a couple of IPAs, and like, what's in this? What's in this? Who's being sacrificed? Where's it happen? Does it happen on the bandstand? You know, like, it doesn't seem like you could ever relax here. Everyone's puts on airs like they're like, you know, kind of in tune with nature and stuff, but it doesn't seem like a very relaxing place. And maybe it's not like this all the time. They do say this is like a once in 94-year thing, so maybe it's like quite lovely, you know. Like the other 93 years, like before it happens, who knows, but probably not, right? I don't know.
Is it only that often? Because I thought it was kind of implied that I'm also forgetting his name, but the one villager that's also a college student that like brought them there. When he talks about his parents dying in a fire, I thought he was saying that they died in that ritual, like in the burning ritual.
Yeah. Certainly could interpret it that way. Maybe the 94-year thing was like I don't know, misleading. They certainly show a bunch of May Queens, like, so maybe certain aspects of it are done every year and other aspects of it aren't. Like,
Yeah, because cameras haven't existed all that long.
yeah, no, yeah, there's no way that there's that many May Queens like going back, unless there's secretly like tech wizards as well. Yeah.
So yeah, oh god, I have a lot of things to talk about with this film, but a thing that kind of bothers me is like Christian's obviously an asshole. We can all agree on that, right? But like he is clearly extremely drugged up by the time Danny's like crowned May Queen, and doesn't even know where he is. Like he's extremely inebriated. and like everything that happens from that point is like intensely coerced. And I have a slight pet peeve with calling the very uncomfortable scene a sex scene, because it's like it's pretty explicitly rape. And
Yeah, it's
I was kind of
rapey,
astonished how many people did not see it that way after the movie. Because like
really?
he's completely out of his mind on drugs at that point.
Yeah, no, I read it as like it's like a group date rape basically. Like
Yeah.
it's, you know, he's been primed, you know, in more than one with, I mean, there's all kinds of shit they're feeding, the stuff that he drinks, and then also the vapors, who the fuck knows like what that's all about. Yeah, no, I read it that, but yeah, that's interesting that people wouldn't see that as sort of non-consensual. Like, I guess maybe the assumption is like, you know, because he's a scumbag, maybe some people would think like, oh, like, you know, he's going after like the young, like, you know, village girl, and he's unhappy in his relationship. So I guess I could see the connection, but the drugs make
I
it
think
pretty obvious.
because before all of that happened, when she first kind of like gives him attention when they're all dancing and they haven't had any well, I guess they've had like the mushrooms, but they haven't had any of the other drugs yet. He does like get up and go dance with her. But it's like, okay, yeah, that's one, that's very different. And second, like that's still shitty what happens to him. I have trouble grappling with the ending, because it's like, don't they also say Danny can't really talk or move when she's in that flower suit?
I didn't catch that part.
Yeah, me either, but
Okay.
it's possible I could have missed it.
But yeah, when they put it in her hands to like choose who burns, I'm like, oh my god, because she's also drugged out of her
Incredibly fucked up.
mind.
Yeah.
And
It's disturbing. I mean, and I think like that's probably a little bit of the intention, you know, is to make you uncomfortable, right? Like she's clearly doesn't have full agency. He certainly didn't either. Oh, and I gotta give a shout out. Probably the second grossest thing for me is definitely that blood eagle that he stumbles across, like all fucked up. That it took me a minute to process it. Like when I saw it, I was like, that's really, really, really grim.
and the fact that the lungs are still moving.
Oh, yeah. Yep. That's pretty wild. I feel like that's probably the person that gets the worst in the movie. Like honestly, we don't see a couple of the deaths, like so we don't 100% know, but I feel like that's probably got to be the most torturous out of all of them.
Especially since like he disappeared a couple days earlier, right? So like he's been like that a few days.
I will say like kind of along the lines of more of like the emotional core, I suppose, for lack of a better term. One thing I think this movie does do well is sort of like the depictions of like anxiety and like grief and things like that. Of course, like Danny's the centerpiece of all that. I think some of those like moments with panic attacks, and then like it's really disturbing, but I feel like it's kind of accurate too. Like if you've been around like certain people, if you suffer from an anxiety disorder like I do, like sometimes people's reactions, like they don't know how to react when somebody's having a panic attack, and there can be sort of a revulsion that's it's unfortunate. It's uncomfortable to like watching the movie, and it makes me feel really bad for Danny, you know, because she's obviously having a very, very tough time, and that kind of revulsion it's heartbreaking, you know. Like it's one of those things that it's understandable in a certain way. I feel like if you're not used to seeing that, you don't know how to handle it, but it does make what she's going through, I think, all the more like heartbreaking and tough to watch. And I think the movie just does in general does a really good way of like depicting like the outward expression of grief and anxiety.
I would agree. And it makes that scene when Danny is crying with all the other girls after she's like found Christian all the more impactful, because that's the first time anyone's actually grieved with her.
Yeah. And it's cathartic in a way where like I think to her she's able to like fully express that like with no shame and no revulsion. You know, they're kind of basking in it. My favorite cut of the movie, by the way, is like the closing of the bathroom door that cuts to her in the airplane bathroom.
That was so well done.
Oh man, it's a beautiful, beautiful transition. All right. Well, I appreciate both of you guys joining me as always for discussion of horror films and the slow burn genre and suffering through Midsommar. I'm sorry. I know it's a bit much, but I think it it's worth the ride if you can get through it, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. So Our next week's episode is going to be Good for Her is our category. So it's, you know, horror with a strong bend towards female protagonists that prevail. And, you know, we'll get into it. I won't say what movies we're going to watch quite yet. Watch the Twitter space for the ability to select one of the 2 films that we'll be talking about. But our guest, Adam, has a pick that you'll just have to wait and find out what that is. Catch us on social media at ScreenQuest Pod on Twitter. Interact with those polls. And for all of you new listeners and watchers, like, thank you so much. Really appreciate seeing the growth this last month and all the new engagement. Really, we owe it all to you. So thanks for sticking with us. And until next time, we love you. Bye.
Bye, guys.